Well, first of all,
I'm sorry. Are any of these recordings or videos going to be available online afterwards?
Yeah, they'll be posted online after.
Okay.
all right, thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers for putting together such a wonderful event. It really warms my heart to see so many of you, and much younger than many of us, which is really great. And thank you for inviting me to talk about history of networking in Canada. I have between 9 to 12 minutes. I can do only a very short presentation, which means that the majority of interesting facts about networking in Canada has to wait for some other occasion. So what I would like to do is to tell you a few facts about great things that were done, but there are people are not talking about this anymore. But I think it's something that we should know and enjoy. And so let me... Hello, computer. These arrows, very good. Right. Now, networks are about connecting computers, so we need some hardware. So let me begin with that. In Canada, the first computers arrived at the end of 1940s, early 1950s. There was a UTEC project at the University of Toronto. The project was successful. The result of that was a prototype demonstrated in 1951, and more or less that was it. To finish it was too expensive, so instead, the University of Toronto, together with the Canadian government, purchased commercially first computer available ever, Ferranti Mark I or Manchester Mark I, arrived in 1952. And look at the third bullet. That was the only computer until 1955. Then we had 3, then 7 in 56, 64 in 1960, and then things were going up. These are numbers for digital computers, so hardware such as analog computers are not covered here. Who knows how many of these there were. All right, so that's the state of computer hardware in the 1950s. Now, depending on how you define networking, if we can stretch the definition a little bit, if connecting a computer to a peripheral over a long distance is quote unquote a network, then that's an interesting event that took place in 1955. The link between University of Toronto and University of Saskatchewan. At U of S, they used a teletype, or rather Teletech machine, to connect with a Ferret computer at University of Toronto. It was quite successful. They shipped a few programs, got results back. Everybody was rejoicing, although nobody recognized how significant that event would be historically. So that's the first really long distance connection between a computer and something else. Right. Things have changed dramatically in the 1960s with the arrival of time-sharing systems. Time-sharing systems were cloud computing of the 1960s, central computer, and you were connecting from your company, from your home, using a dumb terminal or teletype or some other device. Now, at some point, well, in Canada, one of the largest time-sharing systems was IP Sharp Associates, or IPSA, and so they created their own time-sharing system in '69. It was based on APL programming language, and as I said, they were running the show in Canada. And eventually, some of these time-sharing systems evolved into networks, and that is what happened to IPSA. They created IPSANet, pocket switching network, which eventually, by beginning of 1980s, became really a monster, one of the largest networks in the world, mostly doing business-oriented data. So they were known for having the largest collection of data related to everything from how often airplanes were leaving all the airports in the world to auto industry data, lots of that. Now, look at how big they were. So in the 1980s, they linked 800 cities in 80 countries. They were renting transatlantic cables and so on. They were really, really big. Very successful too. Eventually was sold to Reuters, and that was the end of it, right? Now, so this is a picture of one of the links in Amsterdam, and so you see vintage equipment, the teletype. What else? Naked Minis. These were mini computers to run the links, and I can't really show you, but this is probably the only Canadian contribution on the hardware side. It's Dynalogic disk drive. I can identify it. We have in our museum a few of these. Again, that was a typical node. Right. Next thing. BitNet was one of the most popular networks in academia, research-oriented network, introduced in 1981, was very successful worldwide. How big it was? Yeah, it was big in Europe, it was big in North America. Even Gulf nations had a BitNet-like network called, of course, GulfNet. In Canada, we had a version of it, NetNorth. 1983. Originally linked 8 academic institutions, eventually covered the entire Canada. Now, this is an important event because now we are moving closer to internet. So in 1989, they moved to TCP/IP protocols, and the objective was to join, of course, the internet. That happened 2 years later with the creation of CANet. That was a Canadian backbone for the internet. Originally, it was linking regional networks such as ONET, the first Ontario region network, public network actually, launched in 1988, but almost every province and territory would have a local network, and that was linked via CANet. So that was the internet backbone. In 1997, it was absorbed by Bell, and Bell was running internet backbone since 1995. And so there was no dedicated research-oriented network anymore, but one was almost instantly created, and that was CANet2. And actually, the organization Canadian Network for the Advancement of Research is still doing quite a good job, and they maintain a really nice website with the history of CANet. So if you would like to have more information, that's the place to visit. That's CANet, 1990, linking a few of size. So that's the connection to American backbone. These were big boys, right? But then there were PCs. And so how about his little history of networking PCs? And it's interesting because the roots of that actually are in Canada as well. And I would say, again, that's a claim that I would have to work a little bit hard to justify. But the first PC linked to a network was actually a Canadian-made. Actually, it was also the world's first personal computer, MCM70, designed and manufactured by Microcomputer Machines of Toronto. That computer was announced in 1973, so long before hobby computers, Apple ones, Ataris, 8 years before IBM PC. This is how it looked like. And if you want to know more, please do visit our museum. If you want to know more about this fantastic computer, was running on APL programming language. Now, MCM maintained from almost the very beginning that one of the features of personal computing environment is networking. And by 1975, they provided hardware and software to link MCM70 to many things, to time-sharing systems, to IBM mainframes, and to other MCM machines. Well, this is something else, right? So let's talk still about that one. So networking was a big thing, and indeed, that probably is the first computer linked to other hardware, the first PC. All right, there were other things that were worthwhile mentioning. In the 1980s, the availability of cheap modems for PC and home computers finally allowed Canadians to explore the digital world. And in the 1980s, that meant two things. You could connect to electronic bulletin boards or BBS systems. They started to be visible at the end of 1970s and spread across North America. And you see, by 1988, there were over 250, and I've just counted only the major ones. Now, there were, of course, little BBS systems run by kids in basements, so I'm excluding all of that, but just big ones, 250. So that was the one thing that you would connect to, and another were online systems, service systems, computer service systems. And there were a lot of these as well, so that's... Okay, so some of the most successful computer services, AOL, the order is alphabetic, so CompuServe, Delphi, and so on. This is one of the screenshots, what you would see when you connected to some of them, menu-driven sites. Mostly you will have an access to games and maybe a little bit of home finance software and so on. Images, obviously. So that was a big thing. Now, with BBS systems, what was nice is that eventually someone learned how to... All right, that's one. Eventually someone learned how to connect BBS systems so that they could talk to each other. And that was FidoNet. Was available around the world. The only problem was that the connections were typically via phone lines. That was very expensive where you were to do a long distance call or connection to another BBS system. But that was big. Still, it has, I'm quite sure that somewhere in the States every year there's a FidoNet convention. It's still a lot of nostalgia about that. Now, and finally, my favorite, the NABU network, a brainchild of John Kelly, a Canadian entrepreneur based in Ottawa. He had an idea of actually connecting PCs and allowing the users to have an access to data and software. And indeed, in 1983, NABU network was launched on one of the cable stations, because the idea was to use not phone lines, but actually cable. Cable was, in 1980s, Canada was one of the largest countries in terms of mileage of cable. It was the largest, the most cabled country. And cable was fast. So for digital transmission, it was perfect. So the idea was to have a central computer operated by a cable operator, and then you, subscriber, you will have your NABU PC, and you will be connecting via cable in your home to that shared computer. What would you get out of that? For something between $9 and $20 a month, you will have an access to all kinds of software and information. From educational software, business software, programming languages, educational software, and many, many, many categories of games. And information, all sorts of information. From one wine guide, I have a few screenshots. So on the right, wine guide, and it's a fantastic thing to take a look right now, what people were to drink in 1983, prices and descriptions. But all financial information, movies, theater, all of that. Games, of course, such as Miner 2049er, a little spreadsheet, so there was a lot of office software. So everything was available for $9.50 to $20 a month. And as I said, hundreds of games. It was installed in Ottawa in '83, pretty soon in Alexandria in the US, and there was an installation in Japan, although I really have no information other than that they had a trial launch in Sawa, Japan. But whether it was successful, how long it existed, I have no clue. Right, so that's that very, very short description. And now actually, if you want to see the network, it only exists in our museum. We have reconstructed it, and we are running original programming of 1984. So if you would like to test NABU network, that was called Internet before Internet, although by some quote-unquote historians, that's not me. I don't think that was Internet before Internet, but at least it gave people in Ottawa a sense what's coming. So if you would like to run education programs, games, and so on, all of that is in the museum. So speaking about the museum, I would like to take the opportunity to tell you something about it. Started in 2002. It's probably now possibly the largest collection of artifacts related to computing and information technologies in Canada. Right now we are putting together a world-class permanent interactive exhibit, the link. And the networking, of course, will be an essential part of the exhibit. And a few screenshots how it will look like. This is from the outside of the building where it will be installed. And if you would like to have more information about the museum exhibit, if you would like to be part of it, or even better, if you would like to pay for it, please do contact me or the museum using that website. Thank you very much.